15 seconds. Guidance internal. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. Engines armed. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All engines running. Launch commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff at 9:34 a.m.
The Dennis Miller Show. 866-99-DENNIS.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Jabber Chamber. Dennis Miller here. We're joined for the entire hour by author Christopher Hitchens and Pastor Douglas Wilson, who are here to talk about their documentary Collision. The website to garner all info on this is collisionmovie.com, available in book form and available in documentary form, and also hopefully there's still some live ones here, because me being an old Lincoln Douglas guy would like to get out and see this throwdown with each other. Now, we're going to take calls in a second, but I want Chris to retort to the pastor's retort that it was immaterial that there were no Christians at the original table read of the Good Samaritan story. Christopher.
Well, what I was responding to was the pastor's observation that you shouldn't trust a faith that established itself in 1998. I mean, I agree with him in some ways that, obvious fraudulent cults like, say, Mormonism, that say that Joseph Smith got a separate special revelation on gold plates that had to be handed back to heaven before they could be examined, are obviously modern impostures. But in point of fact, in evolutionary time, Christianity might as well have begun in 1998. The human species has been on the planet for Richard Dawkins thinks 250,000 years, perhaps. Francis Collins, the very distinguished Christian who ran the Human Genome Project, says at least 100,000 years. Now, think of the implications of that for a moment. This knowledge we haven't had for very long, though we've been able to guess at it. I'll take 100,000. I'll take the lower figure. That would mean that for 97,000 years, human beings suffered terribly. Most of them would have died in childbirth or later of diarrhea. Life expectancy maybe 22 to 25 years, ruled by fear and disease and panic. They didn't know there were germs or microorganisms. Those, of course, are not mentioned in Genesis because the writers of that didn't know they were there either. Terrible war, famine, horror at things like eclipses, typhoons, earthquakes. No one knows where they're coming from. I don't have to draw you a complete picture, but inching along, every now and then a slight civilization appears, at least for a while. And heaven watches this spectacle for 97,000 years, and then about 3,000 years ago decides we'd better intervene here. But only in very, very backward, illiterate, fearful, agricultural parts of the Middle East. Now, I just think that whatever is true, that can't be true. That couldn't have happened, or if it did, if I concede that it did, then those who believe it have to concede that there's something very capricious, very callous, and very incompetent about the heavenly authority, that's the way it would decide to act. Whereas, in ancient Greece, which predates all these horrific monotheisms, there was a tremendous flourishing of philosophy, of reason, of architecture, of poetry, drama. There were various gods, they're all now dead, as all gods will one day be, but it did give us a better tradition that goes on from Lucretius and Epicurus through to I'm shortening it a bit, but there's a chapter about all this in my book, The Better Tradition, Galileo, Spinoza, Voltaire, Darwin, Einstein, Jefferson, Thomas Paine. And that's the only candle we really have, is the scientific inquiry, skepticism, reason, and philosophy. And whenever it has been able to do so, or felt itself strong enough to do so, the religious always try to put out that light.
And by the way, Socrates did exist. Lucretius, a creation of the fertile mind of Clifford Irving, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go to the phone lines here and touch Indians. Scott in Long Island. Scott, how are you?
Good. How's it going, guys? Just wanted to say I'm a big Christopher Hitchens fan. I'm also a devout Catholic. But his Vanity Fair article on his Brazilian bikini wax made me question God's existence. It really was disturbing.
Well, some design, right?
Yeah,
if you want to rip, you have to grip.
I suggest a lot of people don't read it unless you're prepared.
All right.
I did want to ask Christopher, I've been Catholic schooled all my life. I was taught reason. I was immersed in rationality. It was the whole point of my education. And it always seemed to me, to my atheist friends, that they were really being irrational to claim there was no God, because you're claiming knowledge of something you can't possibly know. And it's not like claiming knowledge of pixies, because people throughout the world and throughout history have believed in a creator. So it seems a little irrational to me to claim that God doesn't exist when you really can't possibly know that.
Well, I would return, first, your compliment. I'll give it back with gratitude, but please don't be a fan. I would rather just have a critical reader, if that's okay. Second, thank you for your kind words. Third, when the Church does resort to, as I would put it, reason, as in the famous case I suppose you would have been having in mind of Thomas Aquinas, it undermines itself ontologically, because if you're looking for proof and if you're looking for evidence, to that extent you're downgrading the idea of faith, surely. Faith is what you're supposed to have. Faith is the great gift. If you dilute this by saying, oh, by the way, there's also proof and evidence, you're making a huge concession to the method that I'm recommending, which is very likely to lead you, my method, to the following conclusion. Not the one you say. Atheists do not say we know there is no God. We don't. No one knows enough to be able to say that. We don't even know enough to say that there's no creator. A creator would be one thing, by the way. You're a deist if you believe in a creator. If you're religious, you have to believe that you know what that creator wants and that you know that he intervenes, which is a huge extra job you'd have to engage in proving.
Let's open it up to...
So we say there's never been a good argument and there's never been any good evidence produced to suggest that there is a God. In that sense, we feel confident enough to say the belief that there is false. We can't say that the belief that there isn't is correct. It's you who have to make the extraordinary claim of proof, because what you say is that this God knows what I'm thinking, cares what I'm doing, intervenes, takes sides in religious warfare, spiritual warfare, and in other human events. And that's an extraordinary claim, and it does require extraordinary evidence, instead of which you have no evidence for it whatever at all of any kind.
Let's shoot it through the other prism as we take a phone call from Peyton in Austin, Texas, and we'll get Pastor Douglas Wilson in with a reaction on this one. Peyton, go ahead.
Yeah, assuming Christopher Hitchens' theorem that Christianity is not good for the world, I'm wondering how he would explain to the people of Calcutta that the work of Mother Teresa there was not good for them.
As much as I love listening to Christopher, the Rev has been good enough, or the pastor has been good enough. Can you field that, Pastor, and shoot it through your side of the perspective?
Yes, I would, and I can perhaps weave it together with the previous question, because the fundamental issue is both reason and morality, and doing good. What Christopher would deny, I think, how much good Mother Teresa did, given his previous work. But let's say that there is genuine philanthropic good deeds being done out there, or there are people of faith who believe in God and who research and use their minds and intellects and use reason, and some of them using reason in the apologetic defense of Christianity and so on. One of the things I would want to do is say, if I step into Christopher's world and hypothesize that there is no God, and then I say, okay, what does that do to the universe I'm in? If there is no God, if there is no overarching sense of this, then that makes the universe a collection of atoms banging around. And so basically, in 200 years, we'll all be dead. And there's no, I'm not going to give an account for anything I do. It doesn't matter in the long run. So Bertrand Russell, an atheist, said that he built his worldview on the firm foundation of unyielding despair. At some point, the sun's going to go out. At some point, I'm going to be dead. The little bit of protoplasm that I am is going to cease to function. My consciousness goes away. Now, if there is no God, then that's true, and that means I have no reason for placing a high value on philanthropic good deeds or on my own ability to reason. If if you took 2 bottles of pop and shook them up and put them on a table and they were both foaming over, fizzing over, you couldn't fill an auditorium to have people come watch the debate.